Hello everybody. It's Smalls here, and I've been thinking a lot about a couple things Naruto based in the last week or so. So there are going to be a good amount of Naruto based discussions. Just putting that out there. So this is the first of them that I really thought of, and that is the fourth Great Ninja War bad? Now, there are a lot of people who hate the fourth Great Ninja War as a whole. I'm talking about all of the arcs that encompass it. All of them. And from what I've seen, it seems that one of the biggest problems that people have with it is the number of villains that take the helm of main villain during that entire event. And honestly, people seem to forget that this was a huge frigging event. And for me, not even touching that right off the bat, I felt like all of the action, the story building, all of the plot, it felt like it was something that had been built up over a long period of time. And this is how we get to a segue to the first villain, Obito. He had a hand in a lot of the events that made Part 1 what it was. All of them. From Naruto's birth and such and so on and so forth. Not really his birth per se, but the circumstances that made it so that the fox had to be sealed inside. And Obito had his time to shine for a long time, although he didn't go by the name Obito during that initial shining. It wasn't for a while that we got to see that Madara Uchiha was the main villain. And honestly, you could feel the build-up towards that. All of the build-up towards Madara. From, what was it, chapter 490 was the first time we really got, a big hint on who the major villain could be, but then we were still guessing. That was our major hint that the masked man calling himself Madara was not Madara. So, of course, putting that together, you get your first real feeling of foreshadowing. And it wasn't until about 60, near 70 whole chapters later that we finally get to know what was in that coffin, and that was Madara Uchiha. And he actually, people think that the villain switched roles way too often. That's where you're kind of wrong, because between Madara coming full force and then the inevitable rise of Kaguya, there were 119 chapters. Yes, I'm saying chapters because I don't fuck with the anime's love for filler. As much as I understand the need to up to a point, there was no need for a lot of the later filler at all. So yeah, there was a lot of time, 119 chapters worth of time for Madara to shine, and he shone perfectly. Sure, not all of it was his shine because Obito came to the front. We also have to realize Obito took a backseat as a villain during that time and became more of an anti-hero, more of a antithesis to Naruto. Something that they greatly touch upon during the entire event. Something that I personally loved during this entire event of the Fourth Shinobi War. I mean, it was done beautifully. And Madara wasn't completely out of it himself either. You could tell that there was some genuine, hope for Madara there. There was some sort of drive that made Madara seem as if he was right. From the moments when he first got his revenge on Hashirama, or to the moments during the fight with Guy and all of the other great things that he did in that short period of time. Well, not really short, but think about it. Nearly 120 chapters, that's a little more than 2 years of publication in the manga. Madara had his time to shine. And he put everything into motion. Now here's where people are less likely to be on the Naruto's good side. Because yes, I do feel as if there wasn't half as much build-up for Kaguya or Black Zetsu. But there was some. It was cutting a tiny bit close. However, there were steps laid out for at least the story to expand further into the role of the Sage of Six Paths, and then the Sage of Six Paths threw his mother into the mix. And the entire conception of the Tail Beast, while seemingly explained to the fullest, there was so much more that the lore could do, and that's exactly what it did by throwing Kaguya into the mix, not as just an extra villain, but as the Ten Tails herself. So in a way, yes, it did feel a tiny bit out of place and a little bit rushed. I admit that. But at the same time, you have to admit there was a certain level of intrigue with Black Zetsu, and, you know, the Sage of Six Paths, and his entire backstory. You have to believe that even if Kishimoto didn't have Kaguya planned out that early on, there was definitely room for her to be inserted. It's not like it came completely out of nowhere. There was room for her in the story of Naruto. Her time was a little bit a little bit more short-lived, honestly. But in the end, she did give us a good last final boss. And while her motives were a little underwhelming, Black Zetsu, who by extension is the will of Kaguya, which if you take it as separate beings, you can kind of see how Kaguya is so out of it, because her will is literally now another being known as Black Zetsu. Take those two together, and then you have the full Kaguya. So it's not completely out of the park, but I digress. Together, they made a decent last villain in terms of how much Black Zetsu not only underestimated the shinobi as a whole, but how he really controlled everything. And because of how much the story focused on what makes a ninja and destiny and the cycle of hatred, to put someone behind the literal controlling seat, not of the entire thing, but behind the main factor of what the story revolves around. He controlled the cycle of hatred. He was whispering in Indra's ear every reincarnation. There is no doubt that Black Zetsu's hand was definitely a welcome addition to the cycle of hatred that had been shown throughout Sasuke's story, in case anyone forgets how much Sasuke was loved by fans. So, yeah, I honestly don't see anything outwardly wrong with the inclusion of Black Zetsu and Kaguya at the very end. Of course, there are others like, other things that made it wrong. So, yeah, this isn't entirely about the villains. I guess we could talk about how Obito gave Kakashi those eyes at the very end. Personally, I actually really like that. Not gonna lie, my logic kind of took a little bit of a dive when I first saw Kakashi use Sasuno. But at the same time, there were little tidbits, like, for example, the Sasuno having the scar, the fact that now that the eyes were technically his to control instead of just borrowing someone else's eye, it felt as if he had a much deeper control over it. Sure, he definitely adapted to it a bit too quickly, but Kakashi's a prodigy, remember. Prodigies have done a lot during the entirety of Naruto. It's not that far of a stretch, considering Kakashi's previous, experience with having a Sharingan for more than half of his life, I presume at this point. Just saying. So, honestly, it isn't that far of a stretch. There are probably other things that we could talk about the Fourth Shinobi Great War, but I feel like those two, in that order, were the main things that fans did not like about it. And I can't disagree with it to a whole. So, if you guys have any comments on this topic, please put them in the comment section below. On top of that, my next discussion, which I'll be putting out a lot sooner, will be based on everyone's favorite female ninja, Sakura. Yeah, there was a little bit of sarcasm in that. I'll explain in that video alone. But for now, don't forget to check out the rest of my stuff that I have for you, as well as check out my social media. I am Smalls Black94, and I hope you guys enjoy today. If not, then fine, just tune in for the Sakura discussion. You'll enjoy that, I think. Later.